Hello and welcome everyone, it is me, the awesome how to do this, back for you with another deck profile. This time, a deck I do enjoy a lot, Krawlers, which got a really cracked card in Power of the Elements, so like, even if it's kind of a month late, I still wanted to share the updated list with you guys, and we'll talk about the new guy in a minute, but before that we gotta talk about the big bad Deus Ex Krawler. If it gets targeted for a card effect while face down, will flip itself face up, and while it's face up on the field, it's basically VFD. Stopping your opponent from activating monster effects of monsters they control. Incredible powerful lockdown effect that really gives this deck some staying power. You can maybe cut this guy down to 1, but I think 2 is just very nice to have, especially in longer, grindier games, which are the games you are looking for with this deck. But your turn 1 setups have become a lot easier and better with the new guy, Krawler Soma. This guy, while in your hand, lets you target a face-up monster you control, swap that target face down, put himself on the board, and is also nice enough to reduce his level by either 2 or 4. And for each, then you can summon Krawler monsters from your deck with levels up to the number of levels you stole from him. So reducing his level by 4 lets you summon 2 more Krawlers from the deck in either face up or in that face down defense position that you would probably be looking for in this deck. Incredibly crazy starter, just this guy and any Krawler is just the dream. So yeah, really sick legacy support card that Konami handed out there for the deck. Going into the main deck names you're playing 3 copies of Krawler Spine. This on flip is Man-Eater Bug. Targets a monster on the field, pops it, very simple, but good removal, and one of the ways you can in-archetype interrupt your opponent in combination with World Legacy Pawns. Also has the Krawler floating effect. Each of the smaller flip Krawlers, if removed by an opponent's card, or by an opponent's card effect, lets you summon 2 Krawler monsters with different names from the deck. Just very nice floating, and since, effect removal is so prevalent nowadays, if you're able to turn one of these guys face up, you can really get some advantage on the follow-up. Next Krawler we're maxing out on is the good old Receptor. This on flip lets you add a Krawler monster from your deck to your hand, which is incredibly cool, and also has the floating effect that Spine has. So floating into those 2 Krawlers is rather neat. Then the, I guess, last one I am maxing out on 3 copies of Gliel. Probably one of the reasons why I am on 2 Deus Ex, because this helps kind of de-brick the big level 9 body, as this on flip allows you to special summon a Krawler from hand or graveyard, which is very nice. Also has the floating effect, so, go figure. But Gliel's just very nice to get additional bodies onto the board. Maybe either chump block or, get a Deus Ex out of your hand in case you draw it. Then I'm playing 3 additional names in Ranveer, Axon, and Dendrite. All of these do different things. Ranveer on flip adds 2 Krawlers from your graveyard to your hand. Axon pops a Spell Trap if flipped, and Dendrite is a Foolish Burial if flipped. All 3, of course, have the floating effect, but these are just additional names that you can maybe kind of vary a bit in the ratios depending how you're feeling. Maybe if you want a second Ranveer for some more or possibilities to add back stuff from the graveyard, maybe a second Axon for some more spell trap removal. Dendrite is probably the one that you don't want to play more than one of. But the other 2 are definitely pretty solid choices to have. Then I guess time for some staples. Playing 2 hand traps, Ghost Ogre, and a playset of Effect Veiler in this deck. Found space for those, so these are kind of nice, as they help keep your opponent in a very simplified state, where your deck just kind of excels, especially if you're able to interrupt your opponent, either turn 1 or turn 2. Then some spell staples, playing a Monster Reborn to, reborn some monsters, and a Terraforming. You can probably substitute the Monster Reborn for another staple, maybe a Caught by the Grave if you have that lying about. But Terraforming is definitely something you want to run, as the deck has a pretty solid field spell in World Legacy in Shadows. This boosts your Crawlers by 300 attack and defense, which is rather neat. Turns Spine, funnily enough, in a 2400 wall, which is very sizable. and allows you to once per turn special summon a level 2 or lower insect from hand in face up or face down defense position, which of course helps, you know, with setting up more flip effects to generate you advantage. Also, if one of your flip monsters is destroyed by battle while this is face up on the field, you are able to send that opponent's monster, which destroyed your flip by battle, to the graveyard. Some very neat removal that kind of punishes your opponent for removing your crawlers in a way that is not advantageous to you, meaning, you know, they try to not let them float. One of the coolest search cards probably comes up next in World Legacy Survivors. You excavate the top 5 cards of your deck and then add an excavated crawler monster or World Legacy card to your hand. And you just casually bin the rest to the graveyard. And for the rest of this turn, you are locked into link monsters. Incredibly cool search spell, lets you get really deep into your deck. And the graveyard setup has some neat synergies, not only for like some of your potential crawler names for the floating of your link monsters, but also with one of your trap cards in World Legacy's Mind Melt. But we'll get into that later. Really cool search spell. Absolutely love it. Then still playing three copies of Wormbait. This while you control an insect monster lets you special summon 2 worm tokens. But you cannot special summon any level 3 or 4 monsters the turn you activate this card. This is basically just another free crawler link, as the smaller ones in Urogos and Synapsis both only take either earth monsters or insect monsters, so you are easily able to get an additional link out of those, but just generally for the extension this is kind of great. So yeah, just free link, I guess, in one card just by controlling an insect is rather nice. And the level 3 or 4 restriction doesn't really hurt you, as like your deck is either level 2, level 7, or a big chunky 9. And then previously mentioned the World Legacy Pawns, or World Legacy Pawns. You can target a face down monster you control and change it either to face up attack or face down defense, face up defense position. Or you can shuffle 1 crawler monster from your graveyard into the main deck and then target a face-up monster you control and change it to face-down defense. This is a way you can possibly flip face-up a DSX crawler on your opponent's turn to just say fuck you, or flip a spine for the smaller fuck you of just popping a monster they control. Both are really good ways of interrupting your opponent. DSX is a bit hard to set up turn 1, but Spine is very easy to set up, and having a quick effect pop is just rather neat, honestly. And also this offers you some decent recursion on the follow-up, which is very lovely. And then maxing out on World Legacy's Mind Melt. Usually this is something you run at less copies, but I honestly found this kind of decent, as this is a trap that you can activate when your opponent activates a monster effect while you control a crawler monster, and the activated effect becomes to return a face-up monster your opponent controls to the hand. You need to be careful with this first effect, as your crawler link monsters no longer trigger if they get bounced back into the extra deck. This was a ruling change, I think, that occurred like 1 or 2 years ago, so maybe look out for that. But if, you know, your opponent bounces a main deck crawler with this, you are able to float, which is rather nice, and you are essentially blanking an opponent's monster effect while furthering your game plan and game state. But the really nice part about this, while we are maxing out on this to potentially mill this off of a World Legacy's Survivors, and why you can even potentially play Foolish Burial Goods in this deck, is that you can banish this from the graveyard to target a link monster and then summon a crawler monster from hand, deck, or graveyard to a zone it points to in face-down defense position. Incredibly powerful effect, gives you some really sick access to your crawlers. Just, you know, additional access to the main deck is rather neat. In terms of the extra deck, a lot of this will be generic, so I'll probably just go over the important archetype stuff. Playing 3 copies of X-Crawler Quali Arc. This guy gains more effects depending on the amount of crawler monsters you control, and has the effect that all crawler link monsters have, because all crawler link monsters, if destroyed by battle or card effect, or if they leave the field because of an opponent's card, will float into 2 crawler monsters from your graveyard in either face up or face down defense. Qualiarch is either another 300 boost if you control 2 or more crawler monsters, stops your opponent's cards or effects from being activated during the battle phase if you control 4 or more Krawler monsters. And if you control 6 or more Krawler monsters, which is possible with the EMZ, your monsters can attack the opponent directly. But in most cases, you will be sitting on 2 and getting a nice boost in for your creepy boys. Then we have some 2-offs. We have 2 copies of Krawler New Rogers. You make this guy with 2 insects. Qualiarch, funnily enough, has to be made with 2 Krawlers. But New Rogers, Krawler monsters he points to cannot be destroyed by battle and gain 300 attack and defense. And if they battle an opponent's monster, they inflict double battle damage. You can probably already tell these all give themselves like 300 boosts, similar to the field spell, which kind of stacks, because if you start getting to like a 2-3 link monster board with this deck, which isn't that hard with Soma nowadays, especially on a possible follow-up, which is very much easier due to, you know, how incredibly good Soma is for turn 1 setups. You can definitely do some damage as these guys kind of, you know, boost themselves up and punch really hard. This guy, you know, just like Krawlers, also floats if, you know, it's somehow removed by your opponent from the field, which is rather nice. And I guess the same goes for Krawler Synapsis. Krawler monsters he points to also cannot be destroyed by battle, gain 300 attack in the face, and can make up to 2 attacks on opponent's monsters during each battle phase, which, you know, also helps with the, I guess, killing your opponent portion, as Synapsis, double attacking, and the double damage from New Rogers can be rather devastating, especially considering that Synapsis also floats, similar to the other 2. A link monster you don't want to miss out on, Lib the World Key Blade Master. Can only be link summoned while you have a World Legacy card in your graveyard, and you can only use each of the following effects once per turn. During the main phase, you can set a World Legacy spell or trap directly from your deck, but it cannot be activated this turn unless you have, or while you have no World Legacy monsters in your graveyard. Gives you some incredibly good access to World Legacy Pawns or World Legacy's Mind Meld. Or possibly even a Survivors if you want to have some more follow-up potential. But yeah, incredibly cool link that lets you search out your important World Legacy cards. And also, funnily enough, if she is linked off while she's face up as a link summoned card, she can shuffle a card on the field into the deck, which doesn't target, which is rather neat. So yeah, she's definitely a really great inclusion in this. And I guess we move into some more generic pieces that you can kind of swap out to your liking. A Seraphim Papillon is here, just as like a good way to revive insect monsters. A Boral Sword Dragon as a link closer. This could probably also be an access code. A Mech Knight Crusadia Avramax, just as another big bongus that can punch your opponent really hard, similar to the Boral Sword. A Nightmare Unicorn and a Nightmare Phoenix for utility and removal. An IP Masquerena to, you know, make Unicorn on the opponent's turn, and a Salamangrate or Mirage to potentially link off a normal summon. Overall, very flexible extra deck, as you can tell. You don't have that many like archetypal cards that you need, so you are definitely very flexible in running whatever kind of links you like and need. But overall, as previously mentioned, the deck definitely got a lot better just simply because Soma makes your turn 1 setups of like getting 2 World Legacy Pawns, maybe a Link Monster and the Spine set, rather easy. And with, you know, that kind of weakness that Krawler always had out of the way, the deck is looking pretty decent. And it was a lot of fun to pilot this again in testing. And yeah, and if you're looking for something very cheap to pick up that is also like decently playable, I don't know, I think Krawlers are a pretty sweet deal. Even if it's just for the meme of playing a flip deck. But let me know what you think down below. And yeah, with all that out of the way, I'll thank you guys very much for watching and see you guys again next time. But until then, goodbye.